The Great Hall of the Galactic Assembly stretched for nearly a mile. Thousands of seats rose in circles around a central platform. Lights of every color floated in the air. Species from 47 worlds filled the chamber with sounds that human ears could barely understand. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood at the center of it all. She was a small woman with gray hair and tired eyes. She had served humanity for 30 years in this place. She had learned to smile when they insulted her. She had learned to bow when they demanded it. She had learned patience that would break most people. Today she would ask them one more time. Honored members of the Galactic Assembly, she began. Her voice was calm and clear. Translation devices carried her words to every ear in the chamber. Humanity comes before you today with a simple request. We asked for what we have earned. We asked for full membership in this assembly. It was not quite laughter. It was something worse. It was the sound of beings who had already decided their answer. Elena continued, anyway, 200 years ago, humanity joined this assembly as a provisional member. We were told this status would last 50 years. We were told that if we proved ourselves worthy, we would be welcomed as equals. She touched a control on her podium. Images appeared in the air above her. Planets transformed from dead rock to green worlds. Ships carrying medicine to plague-stricken colonies. Human soldiers standing between innocent civilians and invading armies. We have terraformed 14 worlds that the Assembly declared impossible to save. We have developed faster than light travel improvements that cut journey times by 40%. We have served as peacekeepers in 3 border conflicts, losing 12,000 of our people to protect species that were not our own. Elena looked up at the assembled delegates. Some would not meet her eyes. Others stared at her with open contempt. A few, very few, looked at her with something like sympathy. We have done everything that was asked of us. We have done more, and still we remain provisional members. Still we are denied a vote in this chamber. Still our colonies can be given away to others without our consent. She paused. Hall was silent now. We ask you today, for the 7th time, to grant humanity the status we have earned. We ask to be your equals. We ask to be your partners in building a better galaxy. Elena stepped back from the podium. She had said what she came to say. Now she would wait for their answer. The HFY delegate rose from his seat. He was tall and thin, with skin like polished metal and eyes that held no warmth. His species had ruled 300 worlds for 10,000 years. They considered themselves the true masters of the galaxy. The human ambassador speaks of earning her place, the HFY said. His voice dripped with amusement. But what has humanity truly earned? A few terraformed rocks, some minor improvements to technology. We gave them the lives of soldiers in wars that were not their concern. He made a gesture that Elena had learned to recognize as deep dismissal. Humanity is young. Humanity is impatient. Humanity does not understand that true civilization requires time, thousands of years, tens of thousands of years. Humanity has existed in space for barely 3 centuries. Other delegates made sounds of agreement. The HFY continued. Perhaps in another 1,000 years, humanity will have matured enough to join us as equals. Perhaps in 2,000 years, some species, after all, are simply not suited for true membership in Galactic Society. Elena felt the words like physical blows, but her face showed nothing. She had learned that too. I move that humanity's provisional status be extended for another century. The Kavari announced, let them prove themselves worthy in that time if they can. Vote was quick. 31 species voted to keep humanity in its place. 16 voted against. The motion passed easily. Elena gathered her documents and walked from the hall. Human delegates and staff fell in behind her. None of them spoke. There was nothing to say that had not been said before. Outside the assembly building, the capital city of Nexus Prime spread out. Before them, beautiful towers reached toward a purple sky. Ships moved between buildings like fish swimming through water. It was a city built by 100 species over 10,000 years. Humanity had helped build some of it. Humanity would not be allowed to call any of it home. Ambassador, her aide said quietly, the Congress has requested that you return to Earth immediately. They want to discuss our options. Elena nodded. She had expected this. Prepare my ship. We leave within the hour. As she walked toward the transport station, she passed groups of alien delegates. Some ignored her completely. Others watched her with expressions she could not read. One, a young Morthani with bright blue feathers, caught her eye and made a small gesture of respect. Elena remembered that gesture. She would remember it for a long time. The journey back to Earth took 3 days. Elena spent most of it alone in her cabin looking at the stars passing by. She thought about her parents who had believed that joining the galactic community was humanity's greatest achievement. She thought about her children who had grown up being told they were less than other species. She thought about her grandchildren who might grow up believing the same thing. Unless something changed. When her ship landed in Geneva, a military escort was waiting. That was unusual. The officer in charge saluted her with more respect than she had felt in months. Ambassador Vasquez, the United Terran Congress is waiting for you. The full Congress. Every representative from every human world. Elena understood what that meant. In the 200 years since humanity spread across the stars, the full Congress had only gathered 3 times. Once for their founding, once when the VHTA hegemony threatened war, once when a plague nearly destroyed their oldest colony. This would be the 4th time. She entered the Congress chamber to find thousands of faces looking at her, young and old, from Earth and from distant colonies, all of them waiting to hear what she would say. Report. Speaker Chen said simply. She was tired. She was angry, but she was still humanity's voice. Our petition was denied. They have extended our provisional status for another 100 years. They made clear that we may never be accepted as equals. The chamber erupted in sound, voices shouting in a dozen languages, fists striking tables. Someone was crying. Speaker Chen raised his hand. Silence fell. What do you recommend, Ambassador? Elena thought for a long moment. Then she spoke the words that would change everything. I recommend that we formally request to address our grievances directly to the full conclave. Every species, every delegate, let them look humanity in the eye when they deny us. The request was sent that night. The Assembly's response came the next morning. Denied. No explanation given. In homes and ships and colonies across human space, people heard the news. They did not shout. They simply looked at each other and understood. Patience had limits and humanity had finally found theirs. 6 months after, Elena Vasquez walked out of the assembly hall. The colony of Tarsus 4 received a message that changed everything. Governor Marcus Chen read it 3 times before he believed it. The words were simple, the meaning was devastating. By order of the Galactic Assembly, ruling conclave, the human settlement designated Tarsus 4 is hereby declared territory of the Verith hegemony. All human occupants must evacuate within 90 standard days. Failure to comply will result in forced removal. Marcus walked to his window and looked out at the city. His grandparents had helped build 80 years ago. The first human ships had landed on this world. They found a planet of red deserts and thin air. The assembly said it was worthless. No species wanted it. Humans wanted it. They had worked for 3 generations to make Tarsus for a home. They built domes to hold breathable air. They planted forests that slowly spread across the deserts. They raised children who had never known any other world. 2,300,000 people lived here now, farmers and teachers, doctors and engineers, families who had buried their dead in soil they had created with their own hands. And now the assembly said it was not theirs. Marcus called his council together. They met in a small room with windows looking out at the growing forest. They read the assembly's ruling carefully. The basis for the ruling was simple. Snorts 4,000 years ago, Vreth survey ships had passed through this region of space. They had marked certain stars as potential Vreth territory. They had never returned. They had never settled. They had never cared about these worlds until humans made them valuable. They cannot do this, council member Sarah Wung said. Her voice shook with anger. We were here first. We built this world. The breath have no claim. Assembly says they do, Marcus replied quietly, and the assembly's word is law. Not our law, another council member said. The Tarsus Compact, our Constitution, it guarantees that no human citizen can be forcibly displaced from their home. The Congress signed it. Every human world signed it. Marcus nodded. He had been thinking about that document all morning. Humanity had written it after learning how the assembly treated lesser species. They had promised themselves that no matter what happened, they would not abandon their own people if we refuse to leave. Marcus said, the assembly will send ships to force us out. Let them try, Sarah said. Marcus sent 2 messages that night. The first went to the United Terran Congress explaining the situation and asking for instructions. The second went to the Vreth hegemony requesting formal arbitration of the territorial dispute. The Congress replied within hours. Their message was short. Help is coming. The Breath did not reply for 3 days. When they did, their message was equally short. Your request for arbitration has been forwarded to the Assembly. The Assembly has denied it. Prepare to evacuate. 2 weeks later, the Vreth compliance fleet arrived at the edge of the Tarsus system. 40 warships, enough firepower to burn the colony to ash, but they did not find a helpless world waiting for them. Admiral Yuki Tanaka had been fighting for humanity since she was 18 years old. She had commanded ships in 3 different conflicts. She had won battles that military experts said were impossible. She was 63 years old and she had never lost. The 7th Terran Defense Group had arrived at Tarsus 4-2 days before the breath. 15 heavy cruisers, 30 destroyers, 200 fighter squadrons. They took position between the colony and the approaching fleet. They had not raised shields or armed missiles. They simply waited. The FTH commander was named Cathrex. He had conquered 12 worlds in his career. He expected this to be easy. Humans were provisional members. They had no right to resist assembly rulings. Their small fleet was nothing compared to his forces. He opened the communication channel. Human vessels, you are interfering with an authorized assembly. Enforcement action, stand down immediately or be destroyed. Admiral Tanaka's face appeared on his screen. She was calm. Her gray hair was pulled back tight. Her eyes showed no fear. Breath Commander, she said, I am Admiral Yuki Tanaka of the Terran Defense Force. I am here to inform you that the citizens of Tarsus 4 will not be evacuating their homes. They are protected by the Tarsus Compact, which guarantees their right to remain. Thrax made a sound of contempt. Your internal documents mean nothing. Assembly law takes precedence. We disagree. Then you will be removed by force. Admiral Tanaka smiled slightly. It was not a friendly smile. Commander, I want you to understand something. My weapons are not armed. My shields are not raised. I am not here to start a war, but I am also not here to watch you murder civilians. She paused. Behind her, officers worked quietly at their stations. If you fire on my ships, we will defend ourselves. If you try to reach Tarsus 4, you will have to go through us, and I promise you this, Commander. We will not fire first. Her smile faded. Her voice dropped low. But we will fire last. The communication ended. Keith stared at the dark screen. His officers waited for orders. He had expected them to run. All the reports said humans were practical. They calculated odds and made logical decisions. They would see that they were outnumbered and withdraw. Instead, they sat there with cold weapons, daring him to shoot. Thrax ordered his fleet to hold position. He sent a message back to Breath Command requesting reinforcements. He explained that the situation was more complicated than expected. Days passed. The two fleets watched each other across the black distance of space. Neither moved, neither fired. On Tarsus 4, life continued. Children went to school. Farmers worked their fields. People lived their lives in the shadow of 40 enemy warships, but they also prepared. Shelters were stocked with supplies. Emergency plans were reviewed. Every adult who could hold a weapon received training. They would not attack, but if the breath came, they would not go. Quietly, news of the standoff spread across human space. It reached the assembly as well. Some species expressed outrage at humanity's defiance. Others watched in quiet fascination. A few, very few, began asking questions they had never asked before. Why were the vets so eager to claim this world? Why had the assembly ruled so quickly? Why were humans willing to risk war over a colony? The Morphani delegate, the same one who had shown respect to Elena Vasquez months ago, requested a meeting with human representatives. Other species made similar requests. Something was changing in the assembly. Something small, but something real. On the 42nd day of the standoff, Vreth reinforcements arrived. 80 more warships. Thrax now had over 100 vessels under his command. He sent a final message to Admiral Tanaka. You Cannot win, you must see that. Surrender. Now and your people will be allowed to leave peacefully. Resist and you will all die. The admiral's reply was calm. I have been joined by the 3rd and 12th Defense Groups. We now have 45 capital ships and 400 fighter squadrons. And more are coming. She was right. Across human space, ships were moving toward Tarsus. The Congress had not declared war. They had simply made clear that any attack on Tarsus 4 would be answered. Thrax looked at the tactical display. His advantage was shrinking by the hour. If he attacked now, he would probably win, but the cost would be enormous. And what would he win? Burned world and an enemy that would never forgive. He made his decision. All ships withdraw to assembly controlled space. We will await further instructions from the ruling conclave. The VTH fleet turned and jumped away. Tarsus 4 remained human on the colony. People gathered in the streets. They did not celebrate. They knew this was not over, but they had faced the darkness together, and they had not broken. Admiral Tanaka received a message from Admiral Chen, now commanding the combined human fleet. Well done, Yuki, but this is just the beginning. The assembly will not forgive this. They will find another way to hurt us. She read the message twice, then she looked out at the stars. Let them try. She whispered, let them try. 3 months after Tarsus, the assembly found a different way to hurt humanity. They could not defeat human ships in open battle. The standoff had proven that they could not simply take human worlds by force without starting a war. They might not win, but there were other ways to break a species. Beldris Prime was a neutral station in the heart of assembly space. Millions of beings from dozens of species lived there. They came to trade, to negotiate, to experience cultures beyond their own. Beldris Prime was supposed to be safe. Violence was forbidden. All species were welcome. Humans had organized a cultural festival there. It was meant to show the galaxy who they truly were, not the aggressive upstarts the assembly described, just people, families, artists, and musicians, and ordinary citizens who wanted to share their heritage. 3,000 humans came to Beldris Prime for the festival. They brought food from 100 worlds. They brought music and dance and stories. They brought their children to see the wonders of galactic civilization. On the 3rd day of the festival, the attacks began. They came from everywhere. Kathvari extremists armed with weapons that should never have reached the station. They moved through the human gathering with terrible purpose. They shot anyone who tried to run. They shot anyone who tried to hide. They shot children who did not understand what was happening. Station security did not respond. They had been withdrawn from the human section 30 minutes before the attack. Someone had given orders. Someone had cleared the way. The killing lasted for 19 minutes. 19 minutes of screaming and blood and fire. 19 minutes that humanity would never forget. 847 humans died. 203 of them were children. Some were later found dead in their own ships, killed by their handlers to prevent them from talking. Others simply disappeared. No one was ever brought to justice. Assembly issued a statement expressing deep regret at the tragedy. They refused requests for an independent investigation. The HFY government claimed the attackers were rogue elements acting without official support. They refused to extradite any suspects. Evidence leaked anyway. Security footage showing HFY officials meeting with the attackers, communications proving that station security had been deliberately withdrawn, financial records linking the weapons to assembly military sources. No one was punished, no one apologized, the assembly simply moved on, expecting humanity to do the same. They did not understand what they had done on Earth. The families of the dead gathered in silence. They did not shout or rage. They held each other and wept. They buried their children in ground that suddenly felt too small to hold so much grief, and then they stopped weeping and they began to plan across human space. Something changed. People who had argued for patience began speaking of action. Politicians who had counseled diplomacy resigned their positions. Military reservists reported for duty without being called. Scientists abandoned their research to work on weapons projects. The shipyards began operating day and night. New designs that had been shelved as too aggressive were suddenly approved. Resources that had been devoted to exploration were redirected to defense. No one announced these changes. No one made threats. Humanity simply began preparing for something they had spent 2 centuries trying to avoid. Ambassador Elena Vasquez returned to the assembly one final time. She did not come to negotiate. She did not come to petition. She came to deliver a message. Every species sent representatives. They knew something important was about to happen. Even the HFY attended, watching with expressions of mild curiosity. Elena walked to the central platform. She wore black. She carried no documents. She simply stood there for a long moment, looking at the beings who had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. I remember she began when my grandmother told me about the day humans first received a message from the stars. We were not alone. The galaxy was full of life, full of civilizations, full of wonders we had only dreamed about. Her voice was steady. Her hands did not shake. We were so hopeful. We thought that reaching the stars would mean joining something greater than ourselves. We thought we would find friends, partners, perhaps even family. She shook her head. Slowly, instead, we found you. Some delegates shifted uncomfortably. For 200 years, we offered you partnership. You answered with contempt. You made us beg for rights you give freely to species far younger than us. You denied us a voice in decisions that affected our people. You treated us as children to be managed, not allies to be respected. Her voice grew harder. We accepted it. We told ourselves that patience would bring acceptance. We believed that if we worked hard enough, served faithfully enough, sacrificed enough of our people in your wars, you would eventually see us as equals. She paused. The hall was completely silent. Then you answered our patience with blood. 847 of our people, 203 children, murdered while security forces watched, murdered with weapons your governments provided, murdered while you did nothing. Elena looked directly at the HFY delegation, and when we asked for justice, you gave us excuses. When we asked for truth, you gave us lies. When we asked why our children had to die, you gave us silence. She took a deep breath. You have taught us what you truly are. We came to you with open hands, and you filled them with the ashes of our dead. We came to you with hope, and you showed us what that hope was worth. She touched a control on her podium. Her diplomatic credentials appeared in the air above her, then dissolved into nothing. I hereby resign my position as ambassador of the United Terran Congress to the Galactic Assembly. Humanity is withdrawing from all assembly functions effective immediately. We will not negotiate. We will not explain. We will simply leave. The crowd erupted in confused sounds. Delegates shouted questions. Guards moved toward the platform. She turned and walked toward the exit behind her. Every human delegate rose from their seats. Staff members closed their terminals. Security officers holstered their weapons. They followed her out one by one in perfect silence. At the door, Elena stopped and turned back one final time. You asked us once if humanity was ready to join galactic civilization. Now we have a different question. Her eyes found the HFY delegate, found the smug certainty in his metallic face. Are you ready for what comes next? She walked out. The doors closed behind her. For 6 weeks human space went dark. No trade ships crossed into assembly territory. No communications answered. Assembly hails, monitoring stations detected massive fleet movements but could not determine where the ships were going. The assembly debated what to do. Some argued for immediate military action. Many believed humans were simply making a dramatic gesture before returning to negotiate. They did not understand. In the darkness of human space, something was being built. Something that had been carefully planned for decades. Something that the Assembly's arrogance had finally given permission to complete. In a quiet office on Earth, Elena Vasquez met with Admiral Tanaka and the leaders of the Terran Congress. How long until we're ready? Elena asked. The Admiral checked her display. 3 more weeks, maybe 4, and then we remind them that patience is not the same as weakness. On a wall behind them hung a simple banner, 2 words in white letters against a black background. Remember Valdris. Humanity would never forget, and neither would the galaxy. For 6 weeks humanity was silent. No ships, no signals, no contact of any kind. At first the assembly celebrated. The humans have finally learned their place, the Cathvari delegate announced. Their little tantrum has ended. They will return soon enough, begging for readmission. Other species were not so certain. Trade routes that had relied on human shipping began to collapse. Medical supplies that human colonies had provided stopped arriving. Technology that humans had maintained fell silent. The younger species, the Morthani, the Selkith, the Viven, watched the older powers with growing concern. They had seen the footage from Valder's Prime. They had heard the Assembly's empty words. They understood something the elder races did not. Humans did not forget, and they did not forgive. 6 weeks after the withdrawal, the Thageman decided to finish what they had started at Tarsus. They assembled a massive fleet, 200 warships, troop transports carrying 100,000 soldiers, support vessels loaded with supplies for a long campaign. This time there would be no standoff. This time they would crush the human colony completely. The fleet arrived at Tarsus 4 expecting battle. They found nothing. No human warships, no defensive stations, nothing but a peaceful colony waiting below. Commander Kathrak smiled. The humans had abandoned their people, just as he had predicted. All forces begin landing operations. Take the colony intact if possible. If they resist, burn them. The transports descended toward the planet. Fighter squadrons spread out to cover The warships took position in orbit. None of them saw the shadows, moving in the darkness between stars. The first warning came when of wrath. Destroyers simply vanished, one moment. It was there, the next nothing but expanding gas and debris. What happened? Keith demanded, before anyone could answer. 3 more ships disappeared. Then 5, then 10. Weapons fire came from everywhere and nowhere. Ships that seemed to fold through space, appearing where no scanner said they could be. Missiles that locked onto targets with impossible precision, beams of twisted gravity that tore vessels apart from the inside. The breath fired back wildly, hitting nothing. Their targeting systems showed no enemies. Their shields did nothing against weapons they had never seen. In 4 hours it was over. 187 breath warships destroyed, all troop transports eliminated. Commander Kathrax's flagship cut in half by a gravity lance that should not have existed. The human fleet appeared from the shadows. Not 15 ships, not 45 ships. Over 300 vessels, designs the Vreth had never seen, weapons that made their own technology look primitive. Admiral Tanaka's face appeared on every surviving breath screen. This is the Terran Defense Force. You are now our prisoners. You will be treated according to human military law, which guarantees humane treatment of captured enemies. Unlike your assembly, we do not murder the helpless. She paused. Tell your masters what you saw here today. Tell them what happens when they push humanity too far. But the Tarsus victory was only the beginning. Across assembly space, human forces struck simultaneously. 3 other human colonies that had been placed under assembly administration were liberated in a single day. Guard stations were neutralized. Occupation forces were captured or destroyed. Human citizens were freed. And then came the second wave. Human cyber warfare units had been preparing for this moment for years. They struck at the heart of assembly infrastructure. Financial networks crashed. Military communications went silent. Surveillance systems showed false data or nothing at all. The assembly's mighty warfleet mobilized to respond. They would crush this human rebellion and restore order. They never made it out of port. Navigation systems showed routes that led nowhere. Engine controls responded to commands that made no sense. Weapons locked onto friendly targets or refused to fire at all. For the first time in 10,000 years, the assembly found itself blind, deaf, and helpless. Emergency meetings were called on every major world. The ruling conclave demanded answer. How had humans developed such weapons? How had they hidden such a fleet? How had they compromised systems that were supposed to be unbreakable? No one even knew where to begin looking. Species that had been assembly allies for millennia suddenly declared neutrality. The Morani recalled their ships to home space. The Selkith closed their borders. The Ven refused to answer communications from the ruling conclave. Trade stopped. Information stopped. Carefully maintained order of galactic civilization began to crack. And then the message arrived. It came on every channel, every frequency, every screen. In assembly space, there was no way to block it. There was no way to stop it. The message showed a simple image. Blue and green world floating in darkness. Earth, humanity's home. Voice spoke. It was calm, almost gentle. People of the Galactic Assembly, for 200 years we tried to be your partners. We Asked for nothing but respect, we gave. Everything we had, our labor, our knowledge, our lives, the image changed. Valder, the aftermath of the massacre. Bodies lying in streets, children who would never grow up, you answered. Our partnership with contempt, you answered. Our generosity with greed, you answered. Our patience with murder, another. Change, human ships moving through space, hundreds of them, thousands now. We answer you. Admiral Tanaka's face filled the screen. Her eyes were hard. Her voice was still. The ruling conclave has 24 standard hours to respond to the following demands: 1. Full and immediate membership in the Galactic Assembly for humanity with all rights and privileges thereof. 2. The dissolution of the current ruling conclave and free elections for a new governing body. 3. Immediate arrest and trial of all parties responsible for the Valdris massacre. She leaned forward. If these demands are not met, the Terran Armada will proceed to Nexus Prime. We will not negotiate. We will not accept partial compliance. We will arrive in force, and we will ensure that justice is done. The transmission ended with 2 words that echoed across the galaxy: we're coming. In the halls of the ruling conclave, chaos reigned. The HFY demanded immediate military action. The breath screamed for revenge. Others called for negotiation, for compromise, for anything that might prevent what was coming. But it was too late for compromise. It had been too late since Valdris. Perhaps it had been too late for 200 years. The 24 hours passed without a response. Humanity kept its promise. In the darkness between stars, the largest fleet ever assembled by a single species began to move. 3,000 vessels, every warship humanity possessed, every fighter, every transport, every support craft. They did not move in secret. They did not hide their approach. They wanted the galaxy to see them coming. On the bridge of her flagship, Admiral Tanaka watched the stars blur as her fleet accelerated toward Nexus Prime. Admiral, her first officer, said quietly, "Do you think they'll fight?" Tanaka considered the question. The assembly still had ships. They still had weapons. They could still resist. "Some will," she said. "The Kefari won't accept defeat until we force them to. A few others will follow their lead. And the rest." Tanaka thought about the young Morani delegate who had shown respect to Elena Vasquez. She thought about the species that had declared neutrality. She thought about all the beings in the galaxy who had watched the assembly's cruelty and said nothing because they were afraid. The rest will decide what kind of galaxy they want to live in, she said, and then they'll choose accordingly. Behind them, human space stood united and unbroken. Ahead of them, an ancient order trembled and began to fall. The assembly had pushed humanity too far. Now they would learn what that truly meant. The Terran Armada arrived at Nexus Prime like a storm from the darkness. 3,000 ships emerged from faster than light travel simultaneously. They filled the space around the assembly's capital world with metal and fire and the promise of consequences. Too long delayed. It was not a battle formation. It was a wall, a statement, a question that demanded an answer. Every ship represented a human colony. Every flag carried the names of the dead. Every crew member had volunteered for this moment, knowing what it meant. For 12,000 years, no hostile force had reached Nexus Prime. The core worlds were supposed to be untouchable, sacred. The heart of galactic civilization. Now, humanity had come to that heart and asked a simple question: what happens next? Admiral Tanaka stood on the bridge of her flagship and watched the assembly. World turning below, beautiful cities, ancient monuments, the accumulated wonder of a 100 species and 10,000 years. She had orders to preserve as much as possible. Humanity had not come to destroy, they had come to change. Admiral, her communications officer, said, we're receiving transmissions from the surface. Multiple governments, most of them are requesting negotiation. And the ruling conclave silent, but were detecting weapons activation at several military installations. Tanaka nodded. She had expected this. Some would fight. Some would always fight, even when they had already lost. Begin the broadcast. She ordered. Every screen on Nexus Prime went dark, then it lit up with images that the assembly had tried to bury. Denial of human membership year after year, the theft of Tarsus 4, the security footage from Valor's Prime, showing exactly who had ordered the attacks. The truth played out across 100 cities. Species that had never questioned their rulers suddenly saw what their rulers had done. Lies exposed, corruption revealed, murder displayed for all to see. On the surface, reactions varied. Keithvari authorities tried to shut down the broadcast. They failed. Their systems had been compromised weeks ago. Morthani citizens gathered in streets watching in silence. Selkeith workers stopped their labor to see what was happening. Even species that had never paid attention to human affairs found themselves unable to look away. The younger races had lived under assembly rule for centuries. They had been told it was necessary, natural, the only way for civilization to function. Now they saw the truth, and the truth set them free. On the Morsani home world, crowds surrounded government buildings and demanded change. On Selkth Prime, military units refused orders to suppress protests. On a dozen other worlds, the old order began to crumble. The Kitfari were not so easily moved. Their remaining warships, perhaps 200 vessels, emerged from hiding and formed a defensive line around their section of Nexus Prime. Their weapons powered up, their shields activated. The HFY commander broadcast a challenge. Humans, you may have defeated the Vreth, you may have corrupted our systems, but we are they. HFY, we ruled this galaxy when your ancestors were living in caves. We will not surrender to primitives. Admiral Tanaka considered the situation. Her fleet outnumbered the Kathvari 15-1. She could destroy them easily. She could end their species as a threat forever. Instead, she opened a channel. Kavari, Commander, I am going to offer you something your people never offered us. A choice. She transmitted tactical data, showing exactly how outmatched the Kathvari were. Ship counts, weapon capabilities, projected battle outcomes. You can fight, you will lose. Many of your people will die. Your home world will burn. Your civilization will end. She paused. Or you can stand down. Accept that things have changed. Help us build something better than what came before. The Kathvari commander was silent for a long moment. On his screens, his officers watched their destruction, calculated in cold numbers. Why would you spare us? He asked finally. After everything we did. Tanaka fought about Valdris, about the children, about 200 years of humiliation and contempt. Because we are not you, she said. Simply, we never were. the Kethvari. Fleet powered down its weapons, shields. Fell. Ships returned to port. It was not quite surrender, it was something more complicated, the beginning of understanding. On the surface of Nexus Prime, human forces landed peacefully. They came as liberators, not conquerors. They secured weapons stockpiles and arrested those responsible for Valdris. But they did not occupy cities. They did not impose human rule. Instead, they invited representatives from every species to gather in the Great Hall, where humanity had been denied so many times. Elena Vasquez entered that hall. One last time, she was not alone. Behind her came delegates from 30 species. Morani and Sulkith, Vin and a dozen others, species that had suffered under assembly rule, species that wanted something different. The hall looked different now. The high seats of the ruling conclave were empty. The old hierarchies had fled or been removed. For the first time in 10,000 years, all species sat at the same level. Elena walked to the central platform. She looked out at the gathered delegates and smiled. 200 years ago, humanity came to this place seeking partnership. We were told we were not ready. We were told we had not earned our place. We were told to wait. She shook her head. We are done waiting, but we are also done fighting. We did not come here to become what you were. We came here to build something better. She touched a control. A document appeared in the air above her. This is the founding charter of the Galactic Compact. It is not a hierarchy. It is not an empire. It is a partnership of equals. Every species has a voice. Every species has a vote. No one is provisional. No one is lesser. Murmurs moved through the crowd. Delegates looked at each other with expressions of hope and fear and uncertainty. It will not be easy, Elena continued. We have centuries of mistrust to overcome. We have wounds that will take generations to heal, but we can try. We can choose to be better than what came before. She looked around the hall. Her eyes found the young Morthani delegate, who had shown her respect when no one else would. He nodded slightly. The question before you is simple. Do you want to join us? One by one, the delegates signaled their agreement. Morthani, Selkith, then even some Kethvari, younger ones who saw a future beyond their ancestors' arrogance. When the count was finished, 30 species had joined the Galactic Compact. Others would follow. The old assembly was dead. Something new was being born. Elena stepped back from the platform. Admiral Tanaka approached and stood beside her. You did it, the Admiral said quietly. After all these years, Elena shook her head. We did it, all of us, everyone who held the line, everyone who refused to give up. She looked out at the gathered delegates one final time. You asked us once if humanity was ready for the stars, she said, her voice carried through the hall strong and clear. You had the question backwards. The question was whether the stars were ready for us. The hall was completely silent. We were patient, we were kind, we tried to earn your respect through service and sacrifice. And when you answered our patience with cruelty, our kindness with contempt, our sacrifice with slaughter. She smiled. There was no warmth in it, only the hard-won peace of a species that had learned exactly how much it could endure. We taught you the mistake you made. She looked directly at the remaining Kethvari delegates, and we will never let you forget it. 1 year later, the Galactic Compact had grown to include 42 species. Trade had resumed. Old wounds were slowly healing. The galaxy was changing. On Tarsus 4, Governor Marcus Chen stood before a memorial to the victims of Valdris. 847 names carved in stone, 203 of them children. He placed flowers at the base of the memorial. Behind him, his grandchildren played in the red grass his people had created. We did not forget, he said quietly. We never will. Above him, human ships moved through the stars they had finally claimed as their own, not rulers, not conquerors, partners at last.